AMD's sample of the Ryzen 7 9850X 3D arrived for review while I was working on this motherboard, the ASRock X870E Taichi OCF. OCF stands for Overclocking Formula. It's a high-end motherboard and it's aimed, as the name suggests, at overclockers. So I parked this motherboard, which had been causing me some confusion, and I jumped onto my review of the processor. It so happens that AMD sent this motherboard along with the 9850X 3D. As you can see, it's an ASRock X870E Taichi, and as the model codes suggest, the X870E Taichi and the X870E Taichi OCF have a fair amount in common. Working with the regular Taichi for a few days cleared up my thoughts about the OCF, and I've decided I like this Taichi quite a lot. But what, you may wonder, do I think about the OCF? So if you click the button and like and subscribe this video, I'll get on and tell you all about it. The regular X870E Taichi is an E-ATX motherboard, and it has 4 DDR5 memory slots. Between the memory slots and the main power connector, there's an M.2 slot with its own heatsink. By contrast, the OC Formula is an ATX motherboard, and it only has 2 DDR5 memory slots. ASRock has dispensed with that extra M.2 slot and populated the area between the memory and the power connector with a series of micro buttons, which are dedicated to overclocking functions. When you strip down the two boards, you can see they have a great deal in common, and the VRMs on the regular Taichi and on the OC Formula appear to be identical. When you look around the ports and connectors, there are a great many differences. For example, on the regular Taichi, we have 6 laid down SATA connectors, where the OC Formula only has 2 SATA connectors. You can also see at the foot of the two boards, the arrangement of the connectors is quite different. And when you turn to the rear I/O panel, the regular X870E Taichi has the usual layout of USB ports. All sorts of different Type A USBs, plus 2 USB Type-Cs, which are USB 4. The rear panel on the OC Formula has a flick switch, so you can switch from BIOS A to BIOS B, and it also has an old school PS2 connector. The idea here is that overclockers love PS2 because it never goes wrong, where a USB mouse might freeze when the going gets tough. To put things in context, let's quickly revisit MSI Z890 Unify X, which is also an overclocking motherboard, but this time for Intel Arrow Lake. We've got loads of armor all over the board, a huge VRM, support for 2 slots of DDR5 memory, and on the rear I/O panel, we've got loads of USB and also 2 PS2 ports. In other words, the approach taken by ASRock with this X870E Taichi OCF looks like a sensible take at a modern motherboard aimed at overclockers. The obvious issue here is that this motherboard supports socket AM5, which means it's AMD Zen 4 and AMD Zen 5. That's brilliant for the DIY market because these processors are very popular, in particular AMD's 3D processors. And we love AMD 3D processors when it comes to gaming because they're absolutely superb. However, as we demonstrated in our Ryzen 7 9850X 3D review, they don't overclock particularly well. So the fundamental idea of an AMD motherboard that's built for overclocking strikes us as slightly peculiar. There's another issue, and that's the ASRock side of things, as they have quite a reputation for damaging processors with their motherboards. This reputation may or may not be deserved, but we see comments quite regularly under our videos on this very subject. And while we were getting ready for this review, we asked ASRock about these reports, and they effectively said, yes, we know about the reports, and we haven't got anything to say on the subject. And that, of course, leaves a question mark against all ASRock X870 motherboards, let alone ones aimed at the overclocker. With that preamble under our belts, let's see what ASRock has to say about the X870E Taichi OCF. For starters, they're talking about memory overclocking. You'll note they're referencing AMD Expo, and they're talking about pushing DDR5 memory to 10,000. You'll notice they also give a table of clock speeds, timings, and voltages. When you're running around DDR5 8000, you can run 1.4 to 1.45 5 volts, but when you push a lot faster, they're talking about 1.55 volts. Do you really fancy pushing that much voltage through your expensive memory? In fairness to ASRock, they give quite a lot of detail about how you should achieve these settings. The fact is that around Christmas we did a review of some A-data memory, and we compared some DDR5 6000 with stock speeds, overclocked, and also some G-Skill running at DDR5 8000. And we found while there were some differences, they were quite small. A bigger point is that ASRock is talking about using some bizarre processors, either a Ryzen 5 8500G or a Ryzen 3 8300G. And the fact is, this is of zero interest to Kid Guru. ASRock goes on to talk about the VRM in the motherboard, but as we've already mentioned, the VRM looked absolutely